before
days of the holiday.
and especially teachers, you know.
Khalid Mehdi is the Secretary General of Kuwait Supreme Council for Planning and Development, the national counterpart of UNDP's country program in Kuwait, and is a member on several high-level government boards and committees, such as the Public Authority for Industries, the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Researches, the Public Housing Authority, and the Public-Private Partnership Committee, and the National Fund of SMA, and the Government Universities Council. Khalid leads national standing steering committees for the implementation of the UN Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development Goals.
Back to viewers, he's responsible for planning and development, the national counterpart of UNDP's country program in Kuwait, and is a member on several high-level government boards and committees. In 2016, Mehdi established the Kuwait Public Policy Center, KPPC, and its NUD unit, reporting directly to him. He also oversees the three other in-house research centers, the National Knowledge Economy Center, NKEC, the National Sustainable Development Observatory, NSDO, and the National Development Research Center, NDRC. Let's all welcome Dr. Khalid Mehdi, Associate Professor at Kuwait University, ex-Secretary General of Planning Council. Mr. Mehdi, it's really a pleasure, Doctor, to have you with us in Good Morning Kuwait.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very delighted to be here talk about some of the experience I had during my exposition. So
absolutely.
I do believe that this is need to be read in the past tense. I already stepped down from my position in June 2024, and I'm back to teach at Kuwait University College of Engineering.
Absolutely, it's really a pleasure and honor, you know, to really gain and get a benefit of your experience and knowledge, Dr. Khalid. It's, you know, you never know what's the future always hiding something to us. But I see the beard is getting whiter. I don't blame you for the responsibilities, definitely.
Working for the government for almost 10 years, it makes not just the beard whiter, it makes also the whole hair, actually. It's already lost anyway.
It's already gone, huh? Anyway, Dr. Khalid, so in your estimation, what were the economic key achievements and milestones they were considered to be a step toward development in Kuwait?
Well, if we want to make this measurement, we have first to rely on reliable data. And what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. This is a golden rule.
Yeah.
During my stay in the government, as well as my following up of what is going on in the country, even before, and when I was working also for the private sector before joining the government, I have to admit that there are not much of a big steps and changes and the milestone that been planned for to improve the economy. But before I give this big, bold statement, I have to make sure on what basis are the data available that we can draw a picture of how the economy look like.
And judge it.
Yeah. And judge it, exactly. So the numbers actually does not say that we are in a terrible economic situation, but does not as well says that we are in a better and advanced one. So we have to be very modest in the way we are presenting the idea. But I need just to point out one thing. One of the problems that many people actually they have when they try to assess the economic status in the country, they do not have the proper official statistics to do it. Okay. This was a challenge when we were in the government. Data are always either missing, or they don't exist, or they are late in the publication, or they do not actually
Precise?
I don't want to say the word precise, but they need to be reviewed.
Okay.
They need to be treated.
Okay.
So this is the role of the Central Statistic Bureau. I mean, the CSB or the Central Bureau, CBS, the Central Bureau of Statistics, they have a very major role and task in the country. For example, we did not have a proper number for the population of the country until 2022.
Oh.
It means that data done in the 2010, the census was never been announced and published properly. Now, when you do planning, one of the most important things is to know the exact population, the census of the country.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
just to give you an idea
I see.
of an important issue in the country, which is the data and the statistics.
If you don't have the exact, precise number
how
of
do you measure
population,
it?
how would you
Exactly.
establish a new cities,
And this is the problem that we always
services
had.
and stuff like
It's
that?
a problem that we always had in the government and still existing, that actually lead to false report at the global level. Because the World Bank and IMF, when they are confronted with no data, they come up with their own data. And the reports will not look good.
Exactly.
Some of these reports, I remember, they show that the country is on the verge of collapse. Because the data they use, it is not the proper data.
Wasn't correct.
But unfortunately, the non-existence of data is causing too much problem. Fortunately, most of these reports are baseless. Now, if you throughout reporting, the mechanism that we see from several agencies who are, they call themselves economic agency, when they come up with report, I dig for what is the basis for their numbers. The basis for their numbers is not official numbers.
Okay.
Because
so
we don't have the official
even
numbers.
the private sector and entities, they are also helpless. They can't help us.
They can, but you know, at the end of the day, you cannot base your policy on private sector numbers. You have to go to the official government body responsible for that. I give you another example. If you ask me about the economic status of Kuwait, I said, okay, I need to look at the GDP. The only GDP reported right now is the first quarter of 2024.
Okay.
And we are in the third quarter. So how can I tell you exactly?
So there is like somehow, let's say, a very slow motion to get data,
I believe the infrastructure.
Okay.
There is an indicator, it's a global indicator called a Statistical Performance Index. Kuwait has a very low Statistical Performance Index, which actually telling us that the infrastructure for data collection, data treatment, data publishing does not really, it's not really strong that can be considered base. And this is why the sovereign rating of the country get influenced and impacted because of the lack of what we call it routine, timely data. There are some data which are timely and routine. For example, inflation rate. We know the inflation rate of the country published in July. This is one of the few economic indicator that is actually being published. We know the labor market structure, which is also a very routine. We know how many Kuwaitis are in the private sector, how many Kuwaitis in the government sector. We know how many non-Kuwaitis in the private, we know the males, females, we know the degrees, the education. This is a very good report published by the Central Bureau of Statistics. So there are some data which are very reliable, very routine, very timely, but there are major economic data which they don't exist,
disappearing,
which is really making a big issue in Article 4 for the IMF report, which is a very routine report, or the World Bank Development Report. We need a routine, timely data published on a regular basis in order to draw a proper picture of the economy. And this is why when somebody asks me, okay, what is the economic side of the country? I said, well, based on whatever data I have, it's such and such. But I mean, I have to be very modest.
We'll go to that in the next question. But I want to ask you, brought up, census to the table. You remember our census back in the 80s
57.
and 70s.
The first one, 57.
57.
One of the oldest.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't born that time. But I remember in the 70s, they used to come door to door.
Yes. It's different now. Now in 2022, they come up with something called the registrar.
Okay.
Now every single person in the country, they have a civil ID, they have documents, they have paper documents.
Exactly.
You don't need to go going door to door, or what we call it field survey. This is need to do if you want to do auditing, or you want to double check, or you do confirmation. But the actual techniques right now,
it's from the
from
data,
your papers.
And the computers.
I mean, there is no single person without papers.
Exactly, without civil ID.
If there are people without data or without papers, they will not be the majority of the population. Now, in the 57 and in the 65 and in the 2000, you need to go door to door to check out and to make confirmation. Still, door to door and survey, it's needed. It is not something which is statistical methodology they don't use. They do use it.
They do use
but for confirmation and for authentication.
Auditing. That's definitely beautiful. Let's go to the economic.
Yes,
Dr. Khalid, can you elaborate on economic initiatives and policies implemented in Kuwait to facilitate our Renaissance progress?
The policies and initiative which actually used to reform the economy, our problem in the country, it is not about financial strength or economic strength. I mean, our problem is structural. The economy structure in the country, it is not sustainable. That's the key word. It cannot last for long because the structure of the economy, it is being based on what we call rentier economy. Rentier economy. Rentier economy, it means it's an economy which is depending solely on one single depleted resource.
Okay, I see.
So if you are
basically depending on oil.
That's called one natural depleted resource. It is natural and it is depleted. So when you are using the word depleted, it means know how long you can stay. It will one day it will stop.
Exactly.
Or not needed. That's another key.
Issue.
It's another issue. Maybe you will have it, but it might not be needed.
Exactly. Hopefully, it's always.
But based on our report, based on what we see from research perspective, you will still need the whole world, the whole globe will still need oil for at least another 50 years. But things will become different if you don't move to diversification. Incidentally, the first diversification report, which I encountered, it was done by the World Bank for the state of Kuwait in the 60s.
Oh, in the 60s.
It's the same policies we are talking and breaching and drafting in the national plan until today.
Until today.
Which is diversification away from oil by improving the status of the private sector and leaving the private sector to lead the economy. It's exactly the same since the 60s. And it's been revived in the 80s, revived in the 90s, and in 2010 it was issued by law. The vision of the country is to make the private sector lead the economy. Since 2010 until now, the contribution of the private sector in the GDP, which is the gross domestic product, which is a very important figure in the economy, this number shows that we did not exceed the 25 more or less. It is even decreasing slowly. The contribution of the private sector is totally limited in the GDP, and that does not ensure sustainability. Other countries, their contribution of the GDP goes sometime for the private sector up to 80%.
80%.
It is very healthy, sustainable, vibrant. dynamic economy. As you know, private sector contribution is very
for
low.
example,
Singapore,
Germany.
Singapore, Germany. These are advanced economy. But I mean, if you are moving, this is the target, is we improve the 25 maybe to 35 by 2035, or maybe to 40%. This is very ambitious, but we are almost in the middle way to 2035. We need to add more efforts, more than what is being spent, in order to improve the contribution of the private sector in the overall GDP of the country. Why? To ensure sustainability of our economic and fiscal status.
I don't know. I sometimes, I don't know, I conclude that from your answer, Dr. Khalid, you're saying we have to move most of the governmental employment to the private sector?
We don't call it moving the employment. We said moving the operation, which is actually it will lead to
privatization?
No, that's the key word. Making the private sector lead the economy, we do not have the concept of fully privatization. We don't have it in Kuwait. We have a law called 2010 privatization. Any commercial entity or any business that actually created away from the government must have 50% ownership by the people.
Ooh.
So do you want to call this privatization? It's up to you. But I would call it a private-like
privatization.
It is not a full privatization.
And they say, correct me if I'm right or wrong.
And by the way, the problem is in the taxonomy, because the way they translate khaskhasa, the Arabic word, they translated the literally.
Literally.
But it is technical. It is any entity that been formed to carry out operation in any sector, it's 50% owned by the people.
By the people,
And we have example. Shamal al-Zor is one. So it is an example. We have al-Hayman, wastewater treatment plant. Also, there is a 50% reserve for IPO. Many people owned, Bank Warba is one of them. I mean, what we get, people owned. So if you want to call this privatization, as you wish, but you need to understand it is not fully transferring to the private sector.
Just because honestly, I have plenty of questions, Doctor, but unfortunately we are out of time. And honestly, Dr. Khalid,
your questions are very heavy, so that take really long time to talk about.
But honestly, really now somehow I got the picture. But don't you? They say when you privatize something, the investor becomes sharing the political decisive important decisions in that country. Is that true?
My dear, this is called the dynamic between the private, the government, and the people, as well as the legislation body, executive body. This dynamic exists everywhere in any economy. You cannot put hard walls between these dynamic interaction of the stakeholder. So it's a question of role and responsibility. And who decide the role and responsibility? The law. Meaning, in any economy around the world, you ask the question, who operate the economy? I said the private sector operate the economy in partnership with the government sector. Now, what is the role of the government? The government needs to be very strong in regulating the private sector, strong in regulating, not stopping the private, not holding, monitoring and regulating against what we call the malpractice. Malpractices are practices that actually cause a problem. For example, monopoly. Who will be responsible to protect against monopoly? The government. Based on their using competition protection agency.
Exactly.
Every country around the world, they have a competition protection agency. That's one. Two, they need to protect the consumer.
Exactly.
Using what?
Yeah.
A consumer protection
don't let the
agency.
the investor, control my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to have a capital money authority is one of the best in the country in order to protect the minorities. You need also anti-corruption agency to avoid having corruption in this sector. So there are roles. The government should not focus on operation. They should focus on these things.
Yes, absolutely.
I will stop now. I think time is running.
Great thanks to you, Dr. Khalid Mahdi, Associate Professor at Kuwait University and Ex-Secretary General of Planning Council. Thank you very much.
You are most welcome, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to shed the light on these things.
Thank you. Yeah. The viewers will go for a break, and after that, we'll be back.